Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Buff Breakdown. We got some surprise interludes on JP for Don Quixote and Constantinos. Some of the bigger names of the TRAUM Singularity, so pretty cool timing for, us NA players as well. Very relatable. As a lot of people know, both of them not the greatest servants out there, sadly. Do like them both, especially Dawn. Gonna grail Mind Suit as well. Yeah, very overdue buffs, I would say, because neither of them have ever been buffed. So today on the menu, we got a skill buff for Dawn and an MP buff for Constantine. So let us start by talking about Dawn first here. So it's a buff to Dawn's third skill, okay? This skill I always was never a big fan of. This was one of the bigger problems he had. So what did it used to do? So on a 5-turn cooldown, you had to have 30% gauge on Dawn to even use this, right? So that was the minimum requirement. You can't even press it if you don't have 30% or more MP gauge. But then what happens is that when you press it, all of your gauge is gone. Like, it's not even a flat reduction, it's everything. Just gone. Even if you have over 100%, it doesn't matter. You lose everything. Ouch. So yeah, that hurts. But what do you get? So party members besides him on the field get 30% instead, right? So it's basically an ally 30% battery minus themselves, of course. And then also a 20 star bomb on use. That was it. So it's basically, a support skill, kinda. Or making them crit easier. With the sacrifice of an MP, which probably not worth it most of the time. So yeah, I always hated this skill, I'm not gonna lie. But let's see what they did. So now on a 5-turn cooldown, you still have the same 30% requirement for your gauge to use this skill. However, big difference. It no longer drains anything from Dawn. Like, not only did they just remove the thing, they didn't even make it like lesser. Like, oh, let's say it drains like 30% flat or something. It doesn't drain anything anymore. Great. Awesome. So now it's a free 30% battery for your allies. Granted, Dawn themselves, have just 30%. Awesome. Love it. Now, it wasn't the only thing they changed, because they also added a new line. So now Dawn gets a 30% power mod against super giant enemies for 3 turns. This is very cool because, as some people might know, his MP already does or has a super effective damage mod against giant enemies. Now, very important here, giant and super giant are 2 different traits, so I'm glad that they basically are trying to cover more bases here instead of, doubling down on this niche, because let's be real, this one or super giant, neither of them are like super common, especially on bosses, so it's nice that now he has both covered via the 3rd skill now. It is 30%, like, he would still do way better against giant enemies because they're super effective on the MP versus this, even though this affects cards, but it's great. It's nice that he's a bit more widespread now. Now again, those 2 were not the only changes. One more change. Well, the party still gets the same 30%, like I said, but now the star bomb was also increased from 20 to 30 stars on use. Now on a 5-turn cooldown, this is suddenly a really good skill. It's not even that hard to get 30% on them. Like, if you max their append, you already get 20% on start, so then you only need like a 10% battery from someone else, or a CE. There's so many different ways to do this, so wow, honestly, this is a huge buff in my opinion. This will actually make Dawn viable for sure. Having that spread 30 for your other allies is actually big. That's a lot of MP gauge with basically no downsides anymore. Now, their 2nd skill also gives them 10% MP per turn, which is worth noting. So while you can't, with the append and this, use it on turn 1, you can at least guarantee it on turn 2, granted you max the battery append. So there's some more, options, I guess. Wow, yeah, I'm a huge fan of this buff. This is great. Now on the Lancer tier list this year, I had them on a C+, which pretty sad, not very high, of course. But with this, I would say B minimum. But honestly, I might jump the gun and just put them in B+. Like, this is a really great buff. So good. Like, maybe even higher. I have to do more play testing and whatnot. But this solves the biggest problem that Dawn had, which was a dead skill a lot of the times. Now, instead of a dead skill, you have a very good skill. Like, wow, what a huge 180 from what it used to be. Very good buff. Love it. I guess we're going to talk about Constantine next. Maybe the most hated SSR gameplay-wise. I remember the tier list as well. There was a lot of hot takes about this guy. Most people think he's the worst SSR in the game. I don't think he was the worst, but I still don't think he's amazing either. If anything, I was kind of trying to play the devil's advocate and, you know, trying to find good uses for him and whatnot. But yeah, let's see what they did, because this is actually a very significant buff too, I can already tell you. So like I said, it's an MP buff this time around. So what did his MP used to do? So on base MP1, he himself got 30% buster up for 3 turns on use. He himself got a 1-time 1-turn invul. And also the party on base overcharge gets a 100% defense up for 1 turn and a 5k damage cut for Roman allies for 1 turn. So it's basically it's like an MP that buffs his own damage and then basically lets your team kinda tank an MP or 2 or 3. Granted, the enemy doesn't have ignore defense, you know, stuff like that, or like crazy high buffs. So it was not the greatest MP, I'll be the first to admit. It's a passable defensive MP is what it was. But let's see what they did, because again, a lot of people were saying like Constantine would be great if he like supported a bit more, right? Like instead of trying to be the DPS himself, because while you can DPS with him, it's never going to be like the greatest thing ever. So let's see what they changed. Did they address any of this? So first of all, that 30% buster up on MP1 for himself is now team-wide. So there you go, 3 turns of 30% buster up guaranteed. Love it. So again, there's that more supportive side coming in. Now, the invul was changed a lot too. It is no longer 1-time 1 turn for himself, rather 1-time 3 turns for the full party. Yes, and also Atlas here does not even list the full story, which is the fun part, but luckily for you guys, I can read Japanese, so reading this red line right here in the middle, there's a bit more text after the 3-turn thing for, you know, for the allies. If I'm reading this correctly, this is saying that this stacks with other invuls. Wow. I believe this is the actual first ever invul in the game that stacks with other invuls. Like, you know how if you have an invul of any kind, be it hit-based or turn-based, none of those stack. Say you use Merlin's Illusion, right, which is a 1-turn invul. You can't use like Rhinus' 3rd skill on someone as well for another 2-hit invul. It would just say no effect because you can't stack invuls of, you know, any type. But this now actually is stackable. Very cool. I love that. It gives it way more flexibility. And it's great that it's now 1-time 3 turns as well instead of just 1 turn. Ooh, very cool. And I believe this would take prio if I had to guess, because chances are it's going to be the latest invul you have on your squad anyway. There's that. But yeah, very cool. It's stackable now. Now, the 100% defense up on overcharge base for the full party remains the same. That's fine. It was already good. And the 5k damage cut for Roman allies. But now, another new line. All allies besides himself, which, you know, because he doesn't need this, get 20% MP damage on base overcharge, scaling all the way up to 40%. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So now, again, recap. AoE buster and MP damage for every other ally. He also gets the buster buff for a bit more bonus for 3 turns each. Invul is now party-wide, 1 time and also 3 turns instead of 1 turn, and it's now stacks with other invuls. Ooh, now that is an upgrade though. Okay, like actually, that is definitely a big upgrade on the MP. Now, will this make him like a super viable either damage support or a tank or protector of any kind? He's still a mixed bag in my opinion. Like, he's kind of all over the place. His own DPS, this really doesn't change at all. Like, his own DPS remains the absolute same. This does nothing for that, okay? So it's still like a whatever burger. But now, he at least buffs his team's damage way more. Granted, you can get the MP, but honestly, his gains are good, so it's not even a huge problem anyway. And then it also protects more as well with the more flexible invul on that MP. Now, my tier list this year, I had him on a B+, which definitely made a lot of people angry, because people say he should be like E tier or something. Yeah, there's a lot of opinions about this guy. Depending on who you ask, he could be anywhere from E to even a higher tier, so. But honestly, with this, I think I'm going to keep him the same. Maybe I was a bit too hasty on the tier list. You know, maybe this was a bit too high of a ranking. But now, with this very nice MP buff, I feel like he can actually be here. Maybe even after some playtesting, granted, if some people find some cool uses for him and whatnot that I just can't see from the top of my head immediately here, he could even be higher. I'm not even joking. This man now actually has some potential. So I can't wait to see what people actually come up with. So there you go. Wow. I was actually editing another video during this, which is actually related to Dawn's third skill as well. So I'm going to have to make an editor's note of that later in that video. Because, yeah, I was not expecting this to happen today, let alone a buff to Dawn's third skill. Wow. Crazy how the stars align sometimes. But there you go. That will do it for today's buff breakdown. Very cool. 2 much deserved buffs and 2, more importantly, actually good and significant buffs. Very cool. This is how buffs should come. Not just random ass, batteries for servant that don't need them. Keep it up, lasagna. Now, if you enjoyed this video, do be a solid and press the thumbs up button on it. It really helps out. Shows that, you guys like the content. Keeps me motivated for making more. Also, do subscribe not to miss out on future videos, including future buff breakdowns, of course. Because, whatever buffs happen, I'll be there immediately to cover them for you guys. Now, with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.